Hello friend, my name is Roy, and I hope you all are doing well. Today's story is about a doll, but not just any doll. This one is believed to be the most cursed doll on Earth, and it still exists to this day. The doll is so dangerous that there are actual rules that must be followed to protect yourself from its curse. Visitors are strictly instructed to follow these rules, or else anything could happen to them. This story begins around 120 years ago, in the year 1905. At that time, a couple named Thomas Osgood Otto and Minnie Elizabeth Otto, who lived in Key West, Florida, traveled to Germany to visit their relatives during the holidays. They were originally from Germany but had moved to Florida, USA years earlier. While walking down the street one day during their visit, they passed by a department store and noticed a doll displayed in the window. The moment they saw it, they were so drawn to it that they decided to buy it for their young son, Robert Eugene Otto, whose 5th birthday was just a few days away. Back in 1905, the world was very different, and it was quite normal for boys to play with dolls. The couple entered the store to purchase the exact doll from the display, but they couldn't find another one of that same size anywhere in the store. They did find smaller versions of the doll, but not the large one like the one on display. The doll in the display was 3 feet 3 inches tall, roughly the size of a 5-year-old child. It had been manufactured in 1904 by the Steiff Company, the same company that created the first teddy bear in 1902, which became immensely popular. Afterward, the company began making various other toys and dolls. However, this particular 3 feet 3 inches doll was made especially for display purposes. At that time, dolls of that size weren't usually sold to the public, meaning it was likely the only one of its kind in the entire world. Despite that, Thomas and Minnie Otto liked the doll so much that they insisted on buying the one from the display for their son. After spending a few more days in Germany with their relatives, they returned home to Key West, Florida, bringing the doll with them. Their home was located at 534 Eaton Street, where they lived with their son, daughter Misbah Otto, and a nanny named Emmeline Abbott, who also had a young daughter named Caroline. A few days later, on October 25, 1905, Robert's 5th birthday was celebrated with great enthusiasm. He received many gifts from family and friends, but the biggest and most special one was the large doll his parents had brought from Germany. Robert was overjoyed when he saw it. As soon as Robert opened the gift and saw the doll, he became so captivated by it that he completely ignored the rest of his presents. He picked up the doll and went straight to his room, which struck his parents as very strange. From that moment on, Robert became entirely absorbed with the doll, so much so that he stopped eating and drinking properly. At first, his parents thought it was normal behavior for a child to get attached to a new toy, but soon they noticed something unusual. Robert began spending long hours alone in his room with the doll. He would talk to it, play with it, even sleep with it. He didn't want to be apart from the doll for even a moment. After receiving the doll, Robert lost all interest in his other toys and focused solely on it, as if the doll had become his entire world. He even gave the doll his own name, Robert, and started calling himself by his middle name, Eugene. He also gave the doll his favorite sailor suit to wear. To this day, the doll is known as Robert the Doll, and is still dressed in that same sailor outfit that little Robert, now Eugene, once gave it. This detail about the name is important to remember. From that point forward, whenever someone in the house called him Robert, he would get upset and insist, "My name is Eugene. Robert is the doll." Over time, everyone in the house began calling the doll Robert and the boy Eugene. Their bond grew so deep that it was like a real friendship between two living beings. But eventually, things took a strange turn, and Eugene's parents began to feel uneasy. One night, Eugene's mother, Minnie, was walking past his bedroom when she heard him talking to someone. Curious, she stopped to listen at the door. To her shock, she heard a second voice, a deep, heavy voice, responding to Eugene. Panicked, she flung the door open, but there was no one in the room besides Eugene and the doll. When she asked him who he had been talking to, Eugene calmly replied, "Robert," meaning the doll. Minnie didn't believe him and questioned him again, but he gave her the same answer. She then searched the entire room but found no one else. That was the first time she truly felt afraid of the doll, and that fear stayed with her. A year passed and it was now 1906. But as time went on, even more strange things began happening around the house. Objects started breaking on their own, things would move out of place, and bizarre occurrences became more frequent. Most of the time, whenever something was broken or misplaced, Robert, the doll, and Eugene were always nearby. Eugene's mother suspected her son of mischief, but whenever she confronted him, he would insist, "I didn't do it." Robert did. This only deepened her fear and her suspicion that the doll was somehow responsible for the strange events. Finally, one day in frustration, she grabbed the doll from Eugene and locked it in a cabinet, believing that would solve everything. But she wasn't the only one in the house who had grown fearful. Other family members were also starting to feel haunted by the presence of Robert the doll. Everyone in the house had started to feel uneasy, including one of their servants, George, who worked there. One night, while George was cleaning dishes, he suddenly heard the sound of a door creaking open. At first, he ignored it, thinking it was nothing. But moments later, he heard footsteps, like someone was climbing the stairs. Curious and a bit nervous, he walked toward the staircase. What he saw left him frozen in fear. The cabinet door, the very one where Minnie had locked up Robert the doll, was now wide open. When he looked toward the stairs, he saw Robert standing there, completely alone, without any support, and staring directly at him. George was so terrified that he ran out of the house that very night and never returned. Time passed, but the strange events in the house didn't stop. Over the years, the family learned to live with the bizarre happenings. Around 1907, Eugene's father, Thomas Osgood Otto, passed away. By that time, Eugene had grown up. As he matured, his attention naturally drifted away from toys. Eventually, he packed Robert the doll into a suitcase and stored it in the attic, then left the house to pursue his career. At first, Eugene studied architecture, but he quickly realized that his true passion was painting. In the 1920s, he moved to Paris, which was then the global hub for artists, writers, and painters. Anyone aspiring to become a great artist at that time dreamt of going to Paris. Eugene followed that same path and began his painting career under the mentorship of several renowned artists. In time, he became a respected painter himself. While living in Paris, Eugene met a talented pianist named Annette Parker. She came from a well-off family and had an impressive background of her own. Their friendship grew over time, blossoming into love, and they eventually decided to marry. On May 3, 1930, Eugene and Annette tied the knot in Paris. Soon after their wedding, the couple left Paris and settled in New York City to focus on their careers. Annette's career as a pianist flourished quickly, but Eugene struggled to find consistent success as a painter. Despite his efforts, his career began to stall. Years passed, and in 1945, Eugene was still facing challenges with his art. Around that time, the couple received distressing news from Key West, Florida. Eugene's mother, Minnie Otto, had fallen seriously ill. Without hesitation, Eugene and Annette left New York and returned to his childhood home in Key West. Unfortunately, just a short while after their arrival, Minnie passed away on September 14, 1945. After her death, the house was officially transferred to Eugene's name. The couple decided they would settle down there and start fresh. After all, Eugene hadn't found much success in New York, so starting over in Key West seemed like a good idea. But returning to that house would turn out to be the biggest mistake of their lives, especially for Annette, because what was about to happen, they could never have imagined. And now, it wasn't just the two of them living in that house. The doll, Robert the doll, was still in the house. And strangely enough, the one who unknowingly restarted all the chaos was none other than Annette. One day, while cleaning the basement, she stumbled upon an old suitcase. Inside it was the same doll Eugene had once stored away. Without thinking much of it, she brought it upstairs and gave it to Eugene, a decision that would turn out to be the biggest mistake of her life. The moment Eugene laid eyes on the doll, it was as if time rewound to his 5th birthday. He stared at the doll with the same intense fascination as he did when he first received it as a child. Without hesitation, he began talking to it, just like a little boy would speak to a best friend. Annette found this incredibly strange, but that was only the beginning. Her life was about to take a very dark turn. Just like Eugene's mother had once heard him talking to Robert, Annette now started hearing those same conversations. She would hear Eugene speaking, and someone or something responding. The eeriness of it all made her deeply fearful of the doll. By the 1950s, that fear had spread beyond the house and into the neighborhood. Eugene spent most of his days in a circular room at the top of the house, which had windows all around. That's where he painted. And every time he worked on a painting, he would place Robert at one of the windows. Children walking home from school and neighbors passing by would often glance up and freeze. Robert would be staring down at them. And it wasn't just from one window. People claimed that no matter where they stood, Robert would always seem to be watching them. Some even said he moved from one window to another in the blink of an eye. These stories spread fast. Soon, people began avoiding the house altogether. Locals started calling it haunted. Guests who visited the home also claimed they heard footsteps and the sound of a child laughing, despite no children living there. Terrified, even guests began to flee the house. Meanwhile, Annette had become so disturbed by the doll that one day, in a moment of anger and fear, she took Robert, locked him back in the suitcase, and returned him to the basement. Eugene tried to stop her, warning her not to do it, but she ignored him and did it anyway. Unfortunately, that didn't bring peace. Annette continued to hear strange noises throughout the house. Then, one night, Annette suddenly vanished. When Eugene woke up, he realized she wasn't in bed. He frantically searched the house until he heard a banging sound from inside a closet. When he opened the door, he found Annette locked inside, crying hysterically. She had been trapped in there all night. When he asked her what happened, she told him that she had heard strange whispers coming from the closet. When she opened the door to investigate, something shoved her from behind and locked her in. She believed Eugene had done it, and in her panic, she accused him of it. But Eugene insisted it wasn't him. Once again, he repeated the same chilling words. Robert did it. Hearing this, Annette trembled in fear. Ironically, it was the same closet where Eugene's mother had once locked Robert years ago. After that incident, the rift between Eugene and Annette began to grow. Days and even weeks would pass where they didn't speak. And when they did, it was only out of necessity. Around 1965, Eugene was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. During the last 10 years of his life, he descended into madness, spending nearly every moment in that room with Robert. Finally, on June 24, 1974, Eugene Otto passed away. Annette was now alone in the house, but Robert still remained. Unable to bear being in that house with the doll, she quickly sold the property to a neighbor named William Geezer. But before finalizing the sale, she made one condition clear. Robert had to stay in the house. After selling the house, Annette moved far away to Massachusetts. But even there, peace was short-lived. Just 5 years later, on January 9, 1979, she died from pancreatic cancer. As for William Geezer, the neighbor who bought the house, he never actually moved in. He, too, had heard the chilling tales of the home and of Robert the doll. Although people had already heard strange stories about the house, just 2 years later, in 1976, it was sold to a couple, William Reuter and Myrtle Reuter, who had no idea about Robert the doll or his history. The couple moved into the house with their young daughter, Sarah. Not long after arriving, Sarah wandered into Eugene's old room and found Robert the doll sitting quietly on a chair. The moment she saw him, Sarah's face lit up with joy. She instantly fell in love with the doll, and from that point on, a new bond began. One that Robert had seemingly been waiting for. Since Sarah didn't know anything about Robert's past, she began spending all her time with him, talking to him, playing with him day and night. But once again, the happiness didn't last long. Unlike Eugene, Sarah didn't only play with Robert. She played with other toys too, and it's believed that Robert didn't like that at all. One night, something bizarre happened. Late in the evening, while William and Myrtle were sitting in the living room chatting, they suddenly heard their daughter scream from her bedroom. They rushed into her room and found Sarah lying in bed, screaming, and Robert the doll was sitting on her chest. William quickly pulled the doll off her and tried to calm her down. When they asked what had happened, a terrified Sarah told them that the doll had been choking her. But William didn't believe her. He thought Sarah was either playing some game or just imagining things. He got angry, scolded her, and dismissed the whole event as childish nonsense. Out of frustration, he took Robert and locked him in a suitcase, then stored him in the basement. But just a few days later, William was found dead. His lifeless body was discovered inside his own car, parked right outside their house. The car was filled with smoke, and the autopsy revealed that he had died from carbon monoxide poisoning. The question still remains, was it just a tragic accident, or was it Robert's curse? No one knows for sure. Many believe Robert took revenge. Now a widow, Myrtle was left alone and financially strained. A few years later, she sold the house and moved into a small home on Von Pfister Street. Strangely, she took Robert the doll with her. Why she did that, no one knows. Eventually, she opened the suitcase again and freed Robert. From that point on, the eerie bond between them resumed and continued for years. Then came the night of August 18, 1994. That night, Robert mysteriously disappeared. Myrtle had left him sitting on a chair, but when she went to check, the chair was empty. While searching for him, she entered another room. Suddenly, the door slammed shut and locked. From the outside, Myrtle screamed and pounded on the door, but it wouldn't open. She broke down crying and began pleading with Robert, asking for forgiveness, begging him to open the door. Then, out of nowhere, the door unlocked and opened on its own. As she stepped out, she saw Robert calmly sitting right back on the chair, outside the room, just as if nothing had happened. That was the last straw. The very next day, August 19th, 1994, Myrtle donated Robert the doll to the Fort East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida. She told the staff that the doll was cursed and washed her hands of it once and for all. But even that wasn't the end. Exactly 101 days after giving the doll away, Myrtle died under mysterious circumstances. In the end, every person connected to Robert the doll met a grim fate, except for Robert himself. When the doll finally arrived at the museum, a new chapter was about to begin. At first, Robert the doll was kept away from public view, locked inside a storage room at the museum. But he was so powerful that his presence could be felt regardless of where he was kept. Strange incidents began to occur inside the museum as well. One day, the museum's plumbing system developed an issue, and a plumber was called to fix it. While inspecting the pipes, he suddenly saw a shadow in the darkness. When he shined his flashlight toward it, he was terrified to find Robert the doll standing right in front of him. The plumber dropped everything and ran out of the museum in fear. And that wasn't the only strange event. Other bizarre happenings started to unfold in the museum. Items would go missing, objects would mysteriously shift from one place to another, and somehow, Robert was always found at the center of it all. Word began to spread about the haunted doll, and soon, crowds started forming outside the museum just to catch a glimpse of him. Eventually, the museum decided to move Robert from the locker room and placed him in a protective glass display case for visitors to see.
But that wasn't the end of Robert's story. It was only the beginning of a new one. Visitors who came to see Robert began having strange experiences of their own. Some claimed to see the doll move. Others noticed a change in his facial expressions whenever anyone said something disrespectful about him, as if the doll could hear everything. Many people reported that their camera batteries would suddenly die when approaching Robert. Some cameras stopped working entirely, and in a few cases, photos taken of Robert would mysteriously not appear in the camera at all. Yet, once people left the museum, their devices began working just fine again. At first, the museum staff thought these were just coincidences. But when such incidents became more frequent, they started to believe Robert was actually behind them. To protect visitors, the museum introduced a strict set of rules to follow before interacting with Robert. The first rule: always introduce yourself. Say hello and tell Robert your name. The second: always treat Robert with respect. Be polite and never, under any circumstance, mock or insult him. Doing so could bring devastating consequences to your life. The third rule: never take Robert's picture without asking for his permission first. And the fourth: always say goodbye before leaving to properly end your interaction. These guidelines were put in place to protect people from Robert's curse. But of course, there were always a few people who thought they were too cool to follow the rules. Skeptics, pranksters, and thrill-seekers. Despite being warned, some deliberately disrespected Robert or ignored the protocols. And for those individuals, the consequences were real. Thousands of people claim to have suffered from Robert's curse. Some lost their jobs. Others had terrible accidents. Many began experiencing strange, haunting events in their homes. Shadows appearing, eerie noises, and an overwhelming sense of fear in their own space. Some even believe Robert has been responsible for several unexplained deaths. The list of those blaming Robert for misfortune is long, and still growing. Soon, letters began pouring into the museum. Then came emails. Later, social media messages. People who had once mocked Robert now begged for forgiveness, admitting their mistakes and pleading for mercy. Only after sending their apologies did many of them claim that their lives started returning to normal. Even paranormal experts, people who investigate the supernatural, came to the museum to examine Robert. And every one of them came to the same conclusion: there is definitely some kind of powerful force inside that doll. This belief about Robert the doll grew even stronger when a paranormal investigator brought a K2 meter near him. This device is used to detect spiritual or paranormal energy, and it began reacting as soon as it was close to Robert. But perhaps even more surprising was what happened when a photographer tried to capture Robert's photo using a special kind of camera. This wasn't just any camera, it was an SLS camera, which is designed to map energy fields or auras. Every living thing, whether it's a human, animal, insect, or even a tree, has an aura, a kind of energy signature. The shocking part? The SLS camera managed to map an aura around Robert the doll. Something that should be impossible for an inanimate object. This left all the experts stunned. To dive deeper into the mystery, the museum brought in Cindy Kaza, a well-known American medium who specializes in communicating with spirits. The moment Cindy got close to Robert, she claimed to feel that the doll was surrounded by numerous spiritual forces. According to her, Robert didn't just have one spirit attached to it, there were many. She explained that the doll itself had been turned into a portal, likely through black magic, allowing spirits to be drawn to it. Over time, more and more spirits had attached themselves to Robert, especially the spirits of children, often those who had unfinished business. Cindy added that once spirits come near Robert, they tend to stay connected with him, wherever he goes. However, she also noted that not all the spirits within Robert are evil. In fact, most of them aren't. But there is one, an extremely dark and angry presence, that is responsible for most of the harm, fear, and suffering associated with the doll. After considering everything, the photographic evidence, expert analysis, and countless personal experiences, it's hard to deny that Robert is truly cursed. If just one or two people had reported such incidents, it might be dismissed as coincidence. But the number of people who've had terrifying experiences with Robert is staggering. This, of course, raises a big question. How can a doll become cursed in the first place? There are two leading theories behind this mystery. The first is based on a belief that dates back centuries. In many old traditions and folktales, it's said that when you give something your name or your clothes, you are passing on your identity, your life force. And in Robert's case, young Eugene Otto gave the doll his very own first name. Not only that, but he made a promise that the doll would be known by that name from then on. Some believe that moment may have been what brought the doll to life. The second theory is based on an old story, one that Cindy Kaza herself mentioned, and that's widely believed among locals. It's the story of Eugene's nanny, Emmeline Abbott, and her unfulfilled purpose in life. If you remember from earlier in the story, Emmeline used to bring her young daughter, Caroline, with her when she worked at the Otto household. According to legend, Emmeline and Eugene's father were at the center of a dark and tragic past. According to the story, Thomas Otto, Eugene's father, was involved in an illicit relationship with Emmeline Abbott, the family's nanny. Caroline, Emmeline's young daughter, was believed to be the result of that affair. Tragically, Caroline died at a very young age, and her death occurred inside the Otto household, at a time when the doll was also present in the home. It's said that after losing her daughter, Emmeline became consumed with anger toward the entire Otto family. Emmeline was reportedly well-versed in black magic and other dark practices. Fueled by grief and hatred, she made a chilling vow. If her own family couldn't live in peace, neither would the Ottos. Acting on that rage, she allegedly cursed the doll, infusing it with black magic, because she blamed the Otto family, particularly Thomas Otto, for her daughter's death. According to Cindy Kaza, it's very likely that Caroline's soul became attached to the doll during this time. And in Cindy's words, this isn't just a story, it's real. So whether or not you believe in spirits, ghosts, or curses, whether you think it's superstition or something darker, the letters, emails, and messages that flood in are undeniable evidence. People only seem to believe it once something happens to them. Until then, they dismiss it. Today, Robert the doll is still housed at the Fort East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida, and has been there for nearly 30 years. This is his permanent home now. So if you ever find yourself in Florida, whether you live in the US or you're just visiting, make sure to stop by and see Robert for yourself. And if you do, don't forget the rules I mentioned earlier, especially this one. If you don't have anything kind to say to Robert, it's better to say nothing at all. Because if you say something rude, Robert will know. And that was the story of the most haunted doll on earth, Robert the doll. I hope you enjoyed learning about it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, my friend. Take care, bye-bye.